everyone, and welcome to Let's Heal with Beth Jones. That's me, your host. My mission is to bring the power of healing to trauma and abuse survivors. That's why every guest on this show will bring you an amazing story of healing in action. So come on, everyone, let's heal. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Let's Heal with Beth Jones. Of course, that's me, your host, and I am delighted for today's conversation with my good friend, Becky Burroughs. Becky, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you, Beth. It is an honor to be here.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I'm excited about our conversation today. I know it's going to be a good one. Would you please start off by telling our audience whatever it is that you would like them to know about you?
Oh, wow. I'm really old, so there's a lot. There's a lot of places I could go. For most of my life, I've had, I think, a really good life. I was married for 41 years. I have 4 children. I have 20 grandchildren. My training is as a speech language pathologist, and I went on from there to become an educational diagnostician, and then I became a high school principal, and now I work in ministry. But along the way, I had what I call an identity crisis.
Hmm.
In a very short span of time, it was like 7 years, my dad died suddenly and unexpectedly. My husband of 41 years walked out the door, ending our marriage. My mom died very slowly, and that required a lot of care, not only before and during her death, but then afterward, having to deal with all of that. And then my job changed. I was the executive minister at a church and had been working at this church for, I don't know, about 15 years at the time. And my role changed. And ordinarily, that's not a big deal. That happens a lot in ministry where they say, I know we hired you to do this, but this other position is where we need you to shift. Happens all the time. But happening at this point in my life, after all this other change, just became another loss because I realized that somehow I had placed my entire identity on the titles I wore and the roles I filled and the responsibilities that I had. And when all of those in this short span of time were stripped away, I was no longer anyone's daughter. I was an orphan now. I was no longer anyone's wife. I was single and hadn't been single since I was 18. And now my job changed, and I looked in the mirror and I saw a stranger. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what my purpose was. I really was lost. I was a lost soul. And I was 60 years old. And so at the age of 60, for the first time in my adult life, to be living alone, to have be completely responsible for myself, to have to financially support myself. I was very fortunate that I had an education and I had a career and I could support myself. But to know how and to know that I could do it, there was just so many things. And so I absolutely was broken. I was completely broken and lost all confidence. I lost confidence as a human, and I lost confidence as a professional, and I most definitely lost confidence as a woman. I felt unloved. I felt unlovable. And I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know what to do to climb out of this deep, dark hole that I found myself in. And it was a very lonely place to be. And so I am a woman of deep faith. I have always had a strong relationship with God, and that's where I turned. I felt ordinarily when you go through problems like at home, you're going to turn to a best friend, you're going to turn to your parents, perhaps. I didn't have parents. I didn't have any friends who could relate to what I was going through. Because when you've been married your whole life, you tend to have married friends. So I did not feel like I had any place to turn, and I certainly did not want to burden my adult children. So I decided to turn to God, and I wanted to learn how to get out of this hole. I didn't want to just survive. I wanted to thrive. I didn't want to just heal. I wanted to be able to use my healing to help someone else.
Yeah.
And so, after much reading, not only in scripture, but every book I could find on grief and loss and healing, I decided to embark on what I call resilient healing. I
Mm.
wanted to bounce back to not just being who I am, but to be the most true version of who I am. Because
Mm.
one of the things that happens when we get married is, and this is just all part of it, all part of tethering ourselves, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but tethering ourselves or
Yeah.
linking arms with another human is we begin to focus on we. What do we like to do? Where do we like to go? How do we want to spend our money? And it's very easy to get lost, to lose who I am in pursuit of who we need to be.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's people who successfully don't lose their identity in marriage, but I certainly did. And I was content to do. I would have stayed married. I
Mm.
would have stayed in the weeness had it not been, had marriage not left me. But that happened. But the fact that I placed my very identity in all these titles that I wore and roles and responsibilities, that's completely on me. I also think it's understandable. I think it's very common. It's very easy to do because when you pour so much of yourself into being a wife or being a mother or being fill in the blank, whatever your profession is, you're giving it the majority of your waking hours, of course you're going to identify with that. And I think a lot of people, I've known people who have left a marriage because they say, I've lost who I am. I don't know who I am anymore. Or they've left a job for the same reason. And I get it. I certainly get it. But it doesn't have to be that way. We
Yeah.
willingly give up our autonomy, our personal identity in pursuit of whatever that thing is, if we're not careful, if we're not guarded about it. And
Yeah.
so I began this quest to find out, number one, at such a ripe age of 60, who am I? And
Mm.
because of my faith, who did God create me to be?
Yeah.
And how can I fully live into that in a way I've never allowed myself to do before? And that's how I got started on my journey.
So you and I, so first of all, I'll say thank you very much for sharing all of that. I appreciate it. And I know that you are a few years into that resilient healing journey of yours. And so talking about it is easier now.
Yes,
And the more and more we talk about it, the easier it is for us to do that. And you, like me, are one of those who's purposely here to share our stories to help others. So it
absolutely.
is easier. But thank you, because I know even though it's easier to tell it, there is a moment of, oh, that's me I'm talking about. And so you don't lose that ever. We never lose that from ourselves, that we are talking about our own pain that we've been through. So
Right.
thank you very much for sharing that. So I'm always struck by the similarities of what you and I both realized. So I was also in a very long relationship, and I was with my ex-husband for 33 years, married almost 30 years, and I met him when I was just before my 19th birthday and married just a little after I turned 21. Maybe you would say the same way, you grow up with that person and it does become a we, right? And so it's always striking to me that similarity of us, the long relationship, but then waking up one day and realizing I was just like you. I had no personal identity, and I had to do a lot of work to find that. And we'll talk more about that process of. And I've never thought about mine as an identity crisis. Always, when you
Hmm.
say that, I think about it when you say it that way. But I do talk about it as masks that I wear. And I say this, I completely lost myself. I had no idea who I was that same day when you woke up and realized I have no idea who I had that day. And
Yes.
it's a scary place to be. And it is a lonely place to be as well. And I realized that I had actually been in that place for a very long time once I saw it. I was 50 when I saw it for the first time for myself. And I don't know if you're 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, when you realize that it's hard. It is. And
Yes.
I do feel that, not just, I mean, I've had that experience you've had. So I definitely feel that when we talk about it as well. So I do want to pause before we keep going into the meat of what we're going to talk about here. And I want to go back to the introduction of your 20 grandchildren, because the fun fact that I love about you is that every one of their names in their birth month, which I think is absolutely incredible.
And most of their birthday, the oldest is 20 and the
Hmm.
youngest is a few months old. So I'm still learning the actual birth dates of the babies.
Yes.
But yes, that is very important to me. The relationship with them. I'm Nana. That having relationship with them is so important to me. Yesterday, I have one granddaughter who is 17 and she's going into her senior year of high school. She lives 2 hours away. And I know once she goes off to college, it's going to be harder and harder to be with her. So she has a custody situation. So she's just coming off of spending 2 weeks with her non custodial dad. So I called her
Yeah.
mom and said, can I bring her to you? That was going to give me 2 hours of private time with this granddaughter. So I
Hmm.
get in the car and we're just driving, and she is talking nonstop the whole time, and my heart is just filling up. I just enjoy every minute and treasure them. As any
Oh,
grandparent listening will know, there's something about when you are a grandparent and you realize how fleeting those years
mm.
are when the children live at home. You have a tendency to treasure them more than perhaps their parents can understand how to treasure them because they haven't been without those kids yet.
Yes.
And so it was just, I look for those opportunities all the time to, when you have as many grandkids as I do, one-on-one time is really hard to get.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so I dream up ways I can have one-on-one time with them just to talk about things that matter to them and just to ask curious
Yeah.
questions. I want to go back to something you said. Oh dear, I've already forgotten it. So I reserve the right to jump back in and come back to it because it'll pop back into my head.
All good. That's
Okay.
all good. Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. So your day yesterday was joyful, and I love that. Yes,
It
that's
was.
amazing. So wonderful. Yeah.
I thought of it. I thought of it.
Okay.
You mentioned how easy it is now for me to talk about this stuff because
Yes.
of years that have passed. That is how I knew I was healing. Because in the
Oh.
beginning, I could talk about it, but you didn't
Mm.
know that I was going to be sobbing. I was going
Hmm.
to be in a fetal position somewhere. Those two indicators, that was the only way I could talk about it, is if you would allow me to sob and be fetal.
Yeah.
Remember, I was getting ready to teach a class at church to a group of young adults on stewardship and about how to manage your money in marriage. And
Mm.
I feel like a phony if I don't tell them my husband left a few months ago. It wasn't public knowledge then. And I stood there in front of them at the end of class and told like the 2 minute version of my story as tears are streaming down my face, but I'm standing. And I
Yeah.
thought, girl, you are on the road to healing. And now I can do it. And then it got to where I could talk about it and only my eyes would water, but they wouldn't roll down my cheeks. And now I can, and then I will talk in a bit about the book I wrote about it.
Mhm.
That, and then I talked about it a lot. And to those who are listening that aren't there yet, you will get there with the healing process if you do the hard work of healing, and it is hard work. Then you will get to the point where you can share your story in a hopes that it will help someone else, and you can do it without completely falling apart.
Yes, we can. It's what I call those little progressions that you were talking about there when we notice them. It's what I call the evidence of hope, right? And that
Yes.
fuels the hope because you see that and it's a spark of joy. Like I felt that before. Like literally, there's a spark there when you notice and you're like, that's different and it feels good. And you know that the
Oh,
progression
yes.
is there. And yeah, that is, it's amazing when you get to experience that and you actually see it. And I think it's important in the healing process to give ourselves credit for that because it
Oh,
is the difficult work we've come through to get to that place.
I am such a strong believer, as women in particular, we're very hard on ourselves. We beat ourselves
Mm,
up. And I'm sure all people do it to some degree, but I just can relate being a woman. But I think celebration is absolutely vital
mm,
to healing.
hmm,
Looking for something to celebrate, even
mm.
the tiniest thing. And so I literally end my day every day thinking, okay, I went through all of this. It was awful, whatever. Anything good, anything I can celebrate, anything noteworthy. And it would be as simple as I didn't lose it today, or
Yeah,
I got through this hard thing today. Anything
yeah,
to celebrate, naming it, owning it, saying it
hmm,
out loud, even if you're
hmm.
the only one in the room, was absolutely paramount to my healing because it reminded me, just like the progression that we've just talked about, that okay, I'm not fully there yet, but I'm getting closer. I
Yeah.
am healing. It is actually happening. And so I agree with you. That celebration piece is vital.
Yes, I like the way you call that the celebration piece because there's so much talk out there about gratitude practice. Sometimes I feel like that's a little bit of an overused phrase. And yes, we should have gratitude for the things that we are given and what's happening to us in our life, whether they are heavy and dark or positive and light, all opportunities that shape us. There are lived experiences that make us the people who we are. But celebrating even the small wins, I love that.
Yes, but let me give you a twist on gratitude that might help.
Oh,
And it helps me because by nature, I'm a learner. I'm always
hmm
looking for the lesson. What can
hmm
I learn from
Me
this? And if I
too.
can find the tiniest
Me
lesson,
too.
somehow it's worth it. And so I'll never forget. I can tell you exactly what highway I was on, what lane I was in. I
Mm.
pray a lot when I'm driving. And so I decided, this was very soon after the separation, I decided I was going to pray a prayer of gratitude and about all the crummy things I'm dealing with. And so I'm going along and I'm saying, God, I'm grateful for this. And I was okay. And then I'm grateful for this. And then I got to one and I thought, okay, that's disingenuous. I can't say I'm grateful for that. And then I got an idea. Every time I said I'm grateful for a thing, I would say, because it is teaching me this, or it has taught me how to, or I've
Mm.
learned that I'm now able to. And if I could attach some lesson that I'm learning as a result of this horrible thing I've gone through, it redeems it in a way. In other words, I never would have chosen this thing, but since I had to go through it, here's what I learned. Here's how I grew. Here's what it taught me. And it's changed the way I think about gratitude.
I love that.
It was
That
helpful
is
for me.
beautiful. Yes, absolutely. Because I think you're right. There are so many things that happen to us. We learn from every experience we have.
We
But
can.
we can. And I mean, you have to be intentional about that, right? You have to do the work to
Yes.
actually say, what did I learn? And that requires you to look inward and to be an honest reflection about what's
Yes.
happening, an honest reflection about your participation in
Hmm.
whatever it is that's happened, because a lot of times we're talking about interactions between two people, and there are two people in that interaction, right? I always think about it in the context of a scale of you're 0% at fault to 100% at fault. And
Yes.
every interaction is somewhere on that scale, probably closer to 50-50. And there are some people that we have in our life who maybe it's one way or the other, but you're on that scale with the other person. And so
Absolutely.
recognizing that, I think, is you've got to be in the place to be able to do that. But I like that because you're right. A lot of times when you're trying to be gracious for something that someone has done to you, I'm experiencing this right now with somebody very significant in my life who's been around in my life for all of my almost 55 years now. And the specific things that happen, it's hard to be gracious for what's been conveyed to me and said to me, but there is a learning and I know that, and I'm going to use that, Becky, because I could really use it right now to find to have gratitude for the learning and really seek the learning. And I'm a seeker and I'm doing that to a certain extent as well, trying to understand what I'm meant to be
Yeah.
learning from this experience. And I know, as a healing mentor, that's what a lot of my life is about. My lived experience is to be able to share with other people. And I know that's happening right now. But
Yes.
for me to have gratitude for that, even in the pain of what's being lobbed my way, I'm going to give that a try and see if I
Yeah.
can help to lessen that a little bit.
And I think even if someone says, I just refuse, I cannot be grateful for this, it was awful, to just say, that was awful, but at least I learned this. I am all about learning and growing, personal
Yes.
development, because we are never stagnant. You never stay exactly the same. You are either
Mm-mm.
getting better or you're getting worse. You're either
Right.
becoming more this or you're becoming. And
Yes.
I'm always, and so I do the same thing with mistakes. I don't
Hmm.
consider a mistake if I learned something from it,
I
if I
agree.
grew somehow, if I can be better for having, because that's where we learn the lessons. I love
Mhm.
it when I do everything right. I just don't learn anything. It's when I make mistakes that I learn valuable lessons that take me to another level.
Now, does you do everything right? Does that happen very often to you? Because it never
Well, I just
happens to
in
me.
in my fantasy world, It happens, but no, not in reality. So if I'm going to have to live in reality, no, it never happens. But that's what I would prefer. I would prefer to always be right, do right, get it right. But when I don't, I used to tank because I'm a type A. I used to
Mm,
tank when I
mm,
would make mistakes. What is wrong? And I would all this negative self-talk. And now
yes.
I'm like, okay, that happened. That wasn't fun. That wasn't your
Hmm.
finest hour. So what
Hmm.
can we learn? And I talk out loud to myself as if I'm another person in the room. So what did we learn from this? Okay, so how can you improve on this next time?
Yeah.
And yeah, I call it, I started doing it at work. I call it a reflective practice.
Mm,
And I taught this at work and make everybody do it. Anytime we have an event or something, I work at a church. So let's say the event's Easter. And I say, okay, the day after Easter, let's meet and let's reflect on it and ask what worked? What did we do right? And there is nothing too small to mention. What did
hmm.
not work about the way we planned that day? Or maybe it didn't work as well as we thought it was going to.
Mm.
Third question is what might we do differently next time? And the fourth is what if? That's the invitation to think outside the box, to what if we did what just there's nothing, there's no stupid idea, everything's on the table. And I started doing that in my personal life. When I have a really bad encounter, like you mentioned, something you're going through, I reflect on that conversation I had with that person. Okay, what did I do? What did I say that was really good? What did I say or do that wasn't so great, or it didn't come out like I thought it was going to, or she didn't appreciate my tone or whatever? How could I handle that differently next time? That willingness to self-reflect is, to me, that was at the absolute foundation of my healing. Because when we are
Mm.
hurt by someone or some people or some things, what we tend to do as humans is batten down the hatches, close, turn inward, and just wallow in these awful feelings we have because we don't know what else to do. It's just a comfortable place to be.
Yes.
I've heard people describe depression. It's just almost like a warm blanket. You just kind of get lost in it. But if we are willing and able to ask ourselves just really pointed questions for purposes of learning, not for purposes of beating ourselves up, but as a learning exercise, then it's just that part of that progression that you mentioned. It's taking that step to healing. And so when I talk about healing, and you and I've talked about our journeys and our approaches a
Mm.
lot over the months that we have been connecting with each other. For me, it is work. It is
Yes.
hard work.
Yes.
You cannot just wait like you wait for something like a plant to grow. You can't just wait it out
Mm.
because you're gonna look up in 6 months, a year, 2 years, five down the road, you're like, I'm still hurting. I'm
Yeah.
still this. You have to be willing to do, and I call it the hard work of grief. One of the things I learned in my quest for resilient grieving is one of the things I learned about myself is I had always reserved grief for death.
Yes.
Somehow, in my mind,
Mm.
everything short of death was just, oh, Becky, what's wrong? You okay? No, I'm just sad. I'm just depressed. I'm frustrated. I would call it everything but grief because I thought you grieved when somebody died. And when I began to study grief and reading books about it, I realized that with change comes loss, and with
Mm.
loss comes grief. And
Yes.
so anything that changes, even if you want it to change, you have to grieve what that change is going to cause you to lose. For example, you're living in a house and you decide, "Hey, this is the house we raised our kids in, but now it's time to move to a different house. Maybe we're going to downsize, or maybe we're going to move to the house of our dreams, whatever." But you make the conscious decision to move. With change comes loss. You have to go, oh, but remember when we had the hash marks where the children grew?
Yeah.
Remember when this happened and that happened? You have to be willing to grieve what you willingly gave up so that you could have this thing that you want. Same thing with empty nest, same thing with changing jobs, same thing with moving to a new city, buying a different car. With
Yeah.
change comes
100%.
loss, and with
So true.
loss comes grief. Once I recognized that and accepted it and began to own it and go, you know what? So somebody goes, how you doing? I'm okay, but I am grieving this decision I made to sell all my lawn furniture that I have so many memories of all the lawn parties. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a small, insignificant thing, but saying it out loud, owning
Yes.
it, embracing it, took away the power it had over me.
Yeah.
Now,
Yes.
that's harder the bigger the grief is. The longer and the harder it is to take away the power it has over you. I get that. But you're not going to do it at all until you name it and own it and walk through it.
Yes, I agree with you. And I do think there's value in starting with those small things
Yes.
where it's easier because you start to practice. And that's where the resiliency comes in, right? Because you
Yes.
get that, you know what it feels like. And so when you get to those ones that are harder and more difficult, you're 100% correct about that. And I feel exactly the same way. It's been my experience. And I know that much of my healing journey has been about grieving the loss of the child that I was, of course, because my
Yeah.
trauma started for me when I was 5. So that's the earliest that I can remember it starting. And so I pretty much my entire childhood was challenged. It was difficult experience. Some really phenomenal and great experiences that I had, but there was a lot of pain in my
Mhm.
childhood as well. And I've realized that I've gone through the grieving stages for that child. And some people call it the inner healing work, the inner child work, right? But really, whatever word you want to give it, ultimately what we're doing is processing the stages, the different emotions that come with the stages of grief. And I've had various experiences since then through my healing journey with other relationships where I know that's what I was doing and grieving. And in fact, what I'm experiencing right now, I was actually thinking about this yesterday. I went through 3 or 4 different emotions yesterday, which I think is also the resiliency, right? Because this is really difficult what I'm dealing with. But yesterday, within a few hours,
Mm.
I went through probably 3, maybe 4 of the different emotions that are there in grief. So I was sad, and then I was angry. I had working on the gratitude. I've had even a little bit of recognition of joy as I've done the gratitude around what I've learned and what the relationship has given to me. But so it's moving more quickly, but that's exactly what I'm doing is grieving. I think people think about it as emotional cycling. It gets all kind of weird labels that try to label you as this or this is what's happening with you. And really, that's all we're doing is just going through the stages of grieving.
Yes, and some people assume that those stages of grieving are linear, like
Ah,
get finished with one and you start the other. It's more like whack-a-mole.
yes.
You never know on any given day. Like I go, oh, today clearly I'm angry. And then the
Yes.
next day I'm sad. And then I go back to anger. But still that identification piece removes or lessens the hold it has on
Yes.
you,
Yes.
identifying what it is and deciding. I remember one day thinking, okay, I guess today I'm just going to be angry. I'm going to try not to take it out on somebody else as
Yeah.
I am angry today and making
Yes.
that okay. And that was
Hmm.
specifically significant for me because some of these personality tests that you take identifies if you're a thinker or a feeler. Always identify as a thinker, which does not mean I don't have deep emotions. I have very strong emotions. I don't trust them. My tendency is to think my way out of them and go,
Hmm.
you shouldn't feel that way
Oh,
because, and I trust my thoughts more than I trust my feelings. One of the things that this experience taught me is how important it is to not only trust my emotions, but to own them, identify them, label them, walk through them, sit in them if I have to. And I can continue to think about them, but those emotions are important. So I've learned to create balance between
hmm.
my thoughts and my feelings. I was married to a man who was exactly the opposite. He was all emotion. And so that was one of the many ways in which we struggled to get along. And so, what often happens in a marriage when you're very different is both of you, in an effort to correct that, instead of coming closer to each other, you get more, he gets more emotional, I get more
Yeah.
thoughtful, and that puts this big divide between you. And one of the things that I have learned and come to appreciate about my journey of healing is, especially after a long-standing marriage where I was very much caught up in we-ness, is I feel more fully who I really am than I ever have in my whole life. I like
Yeah.
myself more than I ever have. I'm using my gifts more, gifts I didn't even know I had. I had a friend that pointed out to me the other day, it wasn't until after your divorce that you wrote a book. And it wasn't until after your divorce that you started going on these speaking tours and all this stuff. And I thought, oh, and it's not that necessarily that my marriage would have prevented me from that, that I was too busy trying to live into who I
Yeah.
thought I was supposed to be that I neglected who I really was.
So what you said there, I think is so important, and that's I want to talk about this for a minute, and I want to come back to the word weeness, and maybe these two are going to go a little bit together because I think what you're saying there is right on. As part of losing our self identity, we're so focused on the role that we're assigned into. And we happen to be talking about the marriage role right now and your role as a wife. And I think this is true also for husbands. It could be, I know it's equally true. It can happen for husbands as well. But whether you're somebody's son or daughter, or you're somebody's employee, you're somebody's Girl Scout troop leader, right? You're somebody's something is how I describe it. I mean, a lot of animals that I cared for a long time, and that became part of my identity was their caretaker, right? That process of adopting and going into that role, it's slow. And over time, losing ourselves, we're doing that in the idea that we're doing the right thing for the role that we've picked up. And in many
Mhm.
cases, the role that we're assigned to when we're born, right? If you're
Yes.
parent or somebody's child,
Family
right? I mean, that's
systems.
the,
Yeah.
right? All of that, right? I think that subtle loss of the self identity in my case, and I think maybe this is the same for you, what I'm hearing you say is that I didn't have any idea I was doing that until I woke up one day and literally probably couldn't even tell you what my favorite color was.
Yeah, and that's true for me as well. And if you had asked me 20, 30, 40 years ago, do you know who you are? And all those questions, I would have uncategorically said, absolutely, I know who I am. I felt like any sacrifices I was making were from through my own free will. So all
Hmm.
the sacrifices one makes as a parent, all the sacrifices as a spouse, as a daughter, any of those, I thought I'm doing this. This is voluntary. I'm doing. Part of my problem is because my generation married so young, and I married at the age of 19. I didn't know who I was at
I
the
didn't
age
at
of
21.
19.
Yeah.
And the idea that I would know not only who I am, but the kind of person that I need to be married to. I got married because I fell in love. And I didn't understand at the age of 19 that just because you fall in love with somebody doesn't mean that's who you should get married to.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I regret marrying him because I don't. We produced four incredible children. We had an incredible life until it wasn't.
Yeah.
But along the way, I lost sight.
Yeah.
I did not prioritize because I thought I'm going to sacrifice this aspect of myself because I know I can, because this other person or this job or whatever needs me. I remember when I was 27 and I was the volunteer women's minister at my church. And so I invited this woman who had written a book that I just loved to come in and do a workshop for us. And I drove her to the airport and I said, this is what I want to be doing. I want to be doing what you're doing. I want to write books. I want to speak. And at that time, I only had two kids and they were both toddlers. And she said, and she was in her 50s or 60s, and she said, and I'm sure you will someday, but probably not in this season. And those were wise words.
Oh, yeah.
But I look back on it now and I'm like, okay, I was 27 and I didn't start doing it till I was in my 60s. But
Yeah.
yet I knew deep down in my 20s that's what I needed to be doing. And yet I couldn't figure out how to do that and keep this identity juggle that I had going.
Yeah. 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 That's cool that you knew it because I didn't. Part of no identity for me was also not having any idea really what I was supposed to be doing in life. In fact, I've talked about this when I was talking about finding your purpose, when I wrote in my book, and I talk about this from time to time, I could look back 10 years before I was writing my book and actually focusing on the process to discover my life's purpose and to actually know what it was. And I was frustrated for so many years because I began to question the seeking part, the thinking part of me. I'm the same as you are in that regard. And I was beginning to really ruminate on what is my purpose. And I was looking around at everything that was before me. And I was like, really? I was like, is this it? It just seemed so, and it was just so very dissatisfying. So I had no idea. And part of that's my story, right? Just the way my journey was meant to unfold so that I
Mhm.
can share my specific experiences, just different from the way that yours unfolded. So I want to talk for a minute about this word we-ness, because a we tends to indicate some level of balance. And I'm curious, when you think about we-ness, and we've been talking about loss of personal identity, when you think about that word we-ness, let's put it on a scale. We've talked about the scale already. So where was we on that scale? If you're really objective and think about it objectively, where was quote unquote we on that scale of 0% Becky to 100% Becky? Were you at 50?
No, and I never done a study on this, but I'm not sure marriages, I would love to know of a marriage that is 50-50.
Yeah.
But I will say, because this
Mhm.
is, I'm going to stick to my story. My story is this. I am a overfunctioner. The way I deal with stress is to overfunction. So if I'm going to make sure I'm doing my part, but if you're not doing your part, I'm going to do your part too. And that's the way I'm dealing with stress. And so that was happening. But the flip side of that is my partner was not really doing their part. And yet I don't like being unhappy. And when I know I can do something, I just go ahead and do it. And I don't realize what I'm doing to myself for functioning. And so that was my story. So no, there was not a 50-50 thing going on. But again, that's part of that is not knowing myself. When you don't know yourself, you don't know what you need. If
Yeah.
I am very content with my life right now, but let's say I were to fall in love and want to get married again. I know who I am. I know what I want. I know what I need. I know what I can live with and what I can't live with. I know what I can't live without. I think I would do a much better job choosing a partner based on me and who I am and what kind of partner I can be. And hopefully I would pick someone that could do the same.
Yes.
We were just two young kids in love
Yeah.
and didn't know anything beyond that.
Yeah.
And so I'm not against marriage and I'm not against weeness at all. I'm not against any kind of partnership. I just know that most of us don't understand, especially if we get married or commit ourselves to someone at a very young age. I'm not sure we have enough information sometimes to make.
I completely agree with that. And the other thing too, and I'll share when you said that weeness, what I know to be true, again, about my circumstances, although we can talk about as our personal circumstances, but I do know you can come to a place, I was going to say, I mean, not only was I very young and didn't know anything, including really not very much about there are a lot of things about myself that were not in my conscious mind. But I've also probably been 10 different people because we change, we grow. That's why we're here. That's what our human existence really
Yes.
is supposed to be about, is evolving and continuing to grow. And so navigating those changes together is also challenge, because the other person is also growing and changing and becoming somebody different, right? And so
Yes.
that's difficult, can be difficult to navigate that together. So my experience with the notion of we-ness, it was very much skewed toward the other person, to the extent, I said this before, like I literally probably couldn't even tell you my favorite color once I had my awakening. And I was like, oh,
Mhm.
wow, this is where I am, and it's not a good place to be. And a lot of that there was a lot of that about keeping the peace. It was just easier to give over. And it really wasn't so much, I was really letting go of things that brought me joy and happiness
Mhm.
because they were irritants to my ex-husband. And rather than being able to say, hey, but I need this, right? And we need some balance here. I was just like throwing stuff out left and right that was an irritant to him and causing stress in the relationship. And so that's where I lost so much of my identity, the identity that I actually still had and that I knew. That's how I lost it, was just giving it over. So it really wasn't when everything, our life became really anchored around everything that he was chasing, trying to get joy and find joy in life, which that's a whole nother topic we can talk about,
Right.
chasing happiness and chasing joy and all the crazy things I did to try to make another person happy, which is a lot of what I was doing, right? Is just you enjoy X, Y, and Z, and so that's what we're going to go do, and never doing the things for myself, even self-care type things that would have created more balance and partnership in the relationship. And so that's how things got very skewed in one direction. And that's a lot of it was me not having a voice for whatever reason. And there are a variety of reasons there about why I didn't have a voice, that I couldn't speak up for myself. And probably was afraid that if I did speak up for myself, it would cause friction and maybe even a loss. And even though, to your point, this is somebody who I probably shouldn't have married, and I have spent a lot of time trying to figure out how I got married to this person, and I know why I was with him so long, and that's because I have a deep sense of commitment, and I'm an extreme caregiver. I can be taken advantage of, and so that just played into who I am. It's how I stayed in it so long, but how I got into it is something I've thought a lot about at that young age. And you know that you were in love. I don't know that I was. But
Mhm.
yeah, this is a person who I chose to commit my life to. And I just basically just spent 30 plus years shucking my identity to take on his. Right?
Yeah.
It was very out of balance by the time we got to the end. And that's not even, I don't think neither one of us here are talking about sharing of duties in the household. That does come into it. It definitely does. And there is some of that for me. And I'm sure there is some of that for you. But it's a different admission and discussion about loss of identity, right?
Yes, that could be an episode.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, I could. And I do think that has a tendency to happen. And so I'm like you now. I'm on my journey, which a lot of my friends are like you and are like, I don't think I'm so ready for this, going into another committed relationship and just choosing not to do that for one reason or another. And my journey has been very much this part of my journey I'm in now, for the most part, has really been about exploring the idea of love across a variety of different relationships and trying to
Uh-huh.
understand it and navigate it and get it more right than wrong, right? And the partner relationship, the significant other, is something I'm much better equipped now to know that I'm going to make a good decision about the person that I choose to spend the rest of my life with. And I have a lot of hope that it is possible. I believe it's possible, but it's only because, as you said before, I know Beth a whole lot more today than I did even 5 years ago.
Yes. Do you know, I saw a study the other day that scared me to death. It said that girls have the most confidence up until age 9, and they do not regain it until age 50.
Wow.
Now, it's a longer, more in-depth study, but it basically gets into, in those other in-between years, what we're busying ourselves doing, losing
Yes.
sight of who we are and people pleasing and ladder climbing and all these things, comparing ourselves on social media and to movie
Being
stars.
traumatized. We can't leave
Exactly.
that out.
But then when we
That's
get older and some of the things we prided ourselves on, we start seeing them are different because we're older and we care less about them. We began to care about other things. And I think for me, that caring about other things is caring about what is unique about me, about the way I
mm,
was created, and what do I need to do with that. And
mm,
that takes so much more precedence for me over how I can look good or who I can please or any of that stuff that used to be so important.
yeah.
But what a journey it is. It is a lifetime journey.
It is.
And
Yeah.
we're all at different phases of it. And I'm so thrilled to watch on the sidelines what you're doing, not only with your mission to with empowered survivors, but your relationship. You've got a good one.
I do have a good
You've
one.
got a good one. And so
I
it's
do.
fun. It's fun to watch you
Yeah.
be happy.
Thank you. And I hope people will see, giving people the hope that it is possible, even when I got it terribly wrong. And as you say, I am grateful that God put me in that relationship for so many years, because I, it was a gift of a huge part of my journey. And I had a lot of things that I learned A lot of good things that I learned. It's funny. I don't know. I posted a video the other day. I don't know if you saw it or not, but one of the light bulbs went out in the headlamp on my little Miata, my little Roadster.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, I was like, why am I going to take it to somebody? Because I've done that in the past. So my ex used to race Mazda Miatas in amateur racing club.
Uh-huh.
And I've raced myself, but pit crew mechanic, done a lot of wrench turning on Miatas. And I was like, why am I going to take this to somebody? I can do this. And so I just went out on YouTube, refreshed my memory on the video, went and bought the bulb, came in, changed it. No, no big deal. And Eddie said to me, which is not the first time he said this, you don't need a man. You're so independent. You don't need a man. I was like,
Oh, how
not for
funny.
that kind of stuff. You're right. I can very much take care of myself and that kind of stuff, right? So I don't
Right.
need it for that. But there are other things that my heart needs. Yeah, it was funny. He is a good one though. So you said the perfect thing earlier about your knowing yourself and knowing your purpose, why you're
Mhm.
here, what your experiences have been. It was a perfect segue into your book. So let's talk about that for a little bit. And I have a copy of it here. Right.
Yes.
So come back to home to you. Right. And this is about navigating life's transitions and embracing
Yes.
the next chapter of living, which is very
Yeah.
much what you've been about. Tell us a little bit about this book coming to life.
Yes. And after the
Mm.
divorce and going through my healing, I began not only reading everything I could get my hands on, but I went back to school to become certified as a professional coach. I knew I've always had it in my heart to help other people. And I felt like getting some credentials as a coach would help me do that in a healthy way. And of course, I remember when I finished the program a year later, I thought if I never coach a single person, this has been worth it because of what I've learned, how I've learned to coach myself. But I
Mm.
knew I had a story to tell, and I didn't know how to tell it without all the salacious details. And so I hired a coach who we're both connected to, April Adams
Hmm.
Twee. And I told her that, and she says, you don't need to tell the salacious
Yeah.
details. No one cares because it's those details that will set your story apart from, they won't be able to relate to it. And so you need to tell your story in a way that benefits your audience. And I'd always wanted to write a book. I actually did a collaborative book with Light Beamers, which is the organization you and I are both in that April runs. And the book is called Elevate Your Voice. And in my chapter, which was chapter 7, I told my story of grief and how, and I tend to personify ideas. And so I personified grief as grief moved in, grief and fear moved in and began living with me the day my husband walked out the door. And
Yeah.
that really spurred this desire of, okay, if you can write a chapter, maybe you can write a whole book. And so I spent 1 year writing this book, Come Back Home to You, because it's my story with some coaching principles of how you can come back home to who you were created to be in the first place with your unique set of gifts and talents and abilities and interests and passions and finding out what that is and then figuring out what you're going to do with it. And so that book is available. It became a bestseller the very first day, which I was very proud of. And it's available on Amazon, either the
Mhm.
book or the Audible version. I read the book for Audible. And so I would love if people would pick up a copy and just read it with the idea of how does this relate to me and my story? We all have stories. And some of us know we have big stories that we don't know if we can tell or how to tell them. And others of us have smaller stories, micro stories that might pull at the thread of that big story, or it's a bunch of little stories that make up my journey. But everyone's story has value because
Yeah.
anything you've gone through has the potential to help someone else. And that's
Yes.
what I wanted to do. The very last chapter of the book, I interview other women about their stories. And so I just thinking about the women that I knew or knew of through someone, I had invited women to that I interviewed that had been divorced, had been widowed, cancer survivors, empty nesters, been laid off or fired from their job, women who had lost babies, and I had all these categories. And so that makes up the last chapter. After I wrote the book, I took it to two friends, my readers, and I said, I want you to read this book, point out anything I need to know before I send it to a professional editor. So one of my readers, after she read the book, we met, and she was a retired English teacher, so she had her red pen and we went page by page, and she had questions on all this stuff. One of the things she said was, I notice you mention women who have lost their babies, but you don't say anything about the IVF experience. And I said, that's because I don't know anything. She said, my daughter went through IVF. And so she began to tell me some things. I delayed the publication of my book. I went back and interviewed, it was 6 or 7 women that I personally knew who had been through IVF. And that's when I realized it's a whole different experience.
Yeah.
I thought that you eventually got pregnant and had a baby. And they said, no, it's not about that. It's about coming to terms with the fact that your body has failed you, what your body was supposed to do. And see, we don't know what we don't know. I was so proud to have included that in that last chapter of the book. So I also, at the end of each chapter, ask questions because I love to make people think
Yeah.
and to ask questions so they could relate it to themselves. And so,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
that I think it's been out for 2 years now, and it's done really well. I'm very proud of it.
Yeah, and I'm very proud of you as well. And it is a beautiful book. It is thought-provoking for sure. And I think a lot of people will benefit from reading the book. So I hope that they will find it as well because it's very inspiring. You and I have different paths to writing because I also wrote in one of the Light Beamers series books. That's how you and I met. So I was in
Yes.
Step Into Your Brave, and where you got your feet wet and said, "Oh, let's go do this again." I got my feet wet and said, "I am never doing that again." But
But how long did that last?
yeah, less than a year. Because I tell people, I've learned that lesson: never say never 25 times, and that
Yep.
was one of the big times that I learned it. But it was also a lesson for me. Don't tell God what's going to happen in your life because God's going to tell you.
You can try, but he will laugh.
He will laugh. Yeah, say, "Oh, yeah, aren't you funny?" As he pats you on the head.
And look how well your book has done.
Yeah, it's done well, and it's created my platform and the
Yes.
business. And I mean, it was the springboard to my healing message and crystallizing it. And I'm like you, I just want the book, I want the message in as many people's hands as possible. So it's been a great journey for that purposes. Yeah, so fellow writers there in the Light Beamer series, which is a great series and a great organization. So a
Yes,
little plug
it is.
for Light Beamers to our audience. You can find Light Beamers on Facebook, just like that, Light Beamer. All right, and you told me this not too long ago that you got your own Audible on the book. So I've had a few people asking me. So I finally got it into the Kindle version, but I've had people asking me for the Audible version. And I just haven't had time with the show launching and now creating my customer journey and all. But I think it is up at some point in the next months. It may be up for me to try to do the Audible version, although I'm about to start writing again too. So we'll see. The next book is mulling in my head and coming. So we'll see if the next book is going to get drafted or if the Audible of the existing one is going to come.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. We'll see. But
I'll be
anyway,
waiting.
all right. So just one more time. Here is the book for everybody out there who's watching. And if you're listening, the name is Come Back Home to You, Navigating Life's Transitions and Embrace Next Chapter Living by Becky Burroughs. And you can find that on Amazon. And before we go, please tell the audience how they can connect with you.
I would love to connect with the audience. I have a podcast called Leadership Becomes Her. And in it, I just give simple strategic solutions for Christian women who lead because I've been involved in leadership for 50 years. And so I would love if people would listen to my podcast and even subscribe to it if they're interested. But you can connect with me a few ways. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Becky Burroughs Coaching, so you can DM me either place, or you can email me at hello@beckyburroughs.com.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes. And I will put links to everything we've talked about, the book and the podcast and all the ways that people can connect with you. I will put links to that in the show notes. So as always, conversations with you are absolutely delightful, and today has been no exception at all. So thank you very much for your time and your graciousness, your candor. It's been lovely having you.
Thank you. It has been my pleasure.
Yeah, lots of fun. All right. Until next time, everyone, keep healing.
I hope you have enjoyed today's episode of Let's Heal with Beth Jones. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel at Beth Jones, Healing Mentor. And if you'd like to know more about me and my work to help other survivors to heal, please visit me on the web at empoweredsurvivors.com.